I can still feel the sting of that leather belt, not just on my back, but on my soul. It was the fall of 1959. I was just 11 years old. I had gotten home 5 minutes late from school because I stopped to help a neighbor carry groceries. The second I opened the door, my stepfather stood in the hallway, belt already in his hand. No words. Just rage. Whip. Did I not tell you? Whip. What time do you come home? Whip. I screamed. My legs gave out, and all I could see was my mother. She was standing right there, at the kitchen doorway. She did nothing. She didn't say a word. Not a whisper. Not even a blink. Her silence hurt worse than the belt. And in that moment, something inside me broke forever. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he did after the beating. And what my mother helped him hide. My name is Jennifer Abraham. I'm an 80-year-old retired nurse from Johns Hopkins Hospital. I live alone now, in a small white cottage in Colorado Springs. I crochet. I read old mystery novels. I keep to myself mostly, except when my granddaughter Emma calls. She's the sunshine in my life. But lately, Emma's been asking questions. About the past. About my past. I tried brushing her off. But she said, "Grandma, you always taught me that secrets rot the soul." So I sat down, and I opened the box. Not a real box. The box in my memory. The one I had sealed shut for 69 years. My mama's name was Rose. She was the prettiest woman in town. Blonde hair like mine, but longer. Always styled. Always smiling in public. She married my real daddy at 19. He died when I was just 4. Mama didn't grieve long. Within a year, she met Robert. Robert was everything my daddy wasn't. Tall. Loud. Had a voice like a drill sergeant and a temper like gasoline. I never liked him. At first, he tried to win me over. Brought me coloring books. Bought me a small radio. Called me princess. But that didn't last long. The moment they got married, things changed. The rules came in. So did the yelling. Then the punishments. He didn't like it when I talked too much. Or when I didn't eat everything on my plate. Or when I cried. Especially when I cried. And Mama. She started changing too. She stopped hugging me at night. Stopped asking how school went. Stopped looking me in the eyes. It's like she vanished without ever leaving the room. One Saturday, I was playing quietly with my one and only doll, Charlotte. Charlotte had yellow yarn hair and a missing shoe. She was my everything. That morning, I accidentally spilled a glass of milk near Robert's newspaper. He didn't ask what happened. He grabbed Charlotte and tore her in half. I screamed. I ran to Mama, sobbing, begging. You know what she said. "Jennifer, stop being dramatic. You're too old for dolls anyway." That night, I cried into a towel. So Robert wouldn't hear. At school, I started acting out. I'd snap at teachers. Refuse to speak. I stopped doing homework. The principal called my mother in. She came. With Robert. He smiled at the teachers. Told them, "We're dealing with it at home." They believed him. Nobody ever asked me if I was okay. At lunch, I ate alone. At home, I slept in silence. Even my birthday passed without a cake. Just Robert's voice, barking at me to get over myself. Was I a bad kid? Did I deserve it? Was I just being sensitive? These questions haunted me for decades. I was just a little girl, desperate to be loved by the two people who were supposed to protect me. Instead, I became their shadow. But everything came crashing down the day I told my teacher what Robert did to me. I thought I'd finally be saved. I thought Mama would step up. But instead, they called me a liar. And what happened next almost killed me. "I'm not lying," I screamed. But no one listened. Not my teacher. Not the principal. And definitely not my mother. Instead, Robert walked into that school with a smirk on his face and crocodile tears in his eyes. He looked at the principal and said, "My stepdaughter has a wild imagination, Rose, and I love her. But she's been acting out." Then my mother, my own mother, nodded and added, "She's going through a phase." That's when they forced me to apologize. Right there. In the office. And when we got home, Robert locked the door and did something that would haunt me for the next 50 years. He cut off all my hair with dull scissors, while my mother stood in the hallway, again, doing absolutely nothing, just staring. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror after that, and honestly, I didn't recognize her either. But that wasn't the end. Oh no. That same week, Robert made a decision that shattered what little childhood I had left. I've replayed that moment in my head 1,000 times. Why didn't she believe me? Why did she let him twist everything? Why did she choose him over me? I was just a little girl, desperate for someone to say, "I believe you. I see you. You matter." But all I got was silence, and the sound of scissors ripping through my curls. When I returned to school with my head shaved and eyes red from crying, I could feel the stares. No one asked what happened. No one pulled me aside. Even the teacher who I confided in avoided my eyes. I was invisible, a ghost walking the hallways. I started wearing a hat to cover my head, but Robert would yank it off before I left the house, just to remind me who was in control. He called it a lesson in humility. I called it cruelty. One afternoon, as I sat alone behind the gym, a soft voice said, "Do you want to come sit by me?" It was Claire Walters, the girl who always brought peanut butter sandwiches and wore red bows in her hair. She didn't ask about my haircut. She didn't ask about the rumors. She just shared her sandwich and said, "You look like you could use a friend." And for the first time in months, I smiled. Claire became the only light in that dark tunnel. We'd meet behind the school building. She'd tell me about her dog, Rusty. I'd tell her about my dream to be a nurse. It was the only place I felt safe. But even that didn't last. One Friday, Robert saw Claire walking me to the corner of our street. He didn't like that. That night, he took away all my school clothes except one oversized dress. Told me if I wanted friends, I should earn them. The next day, he made me scrub the kitchen floor with bleach until my hands peeled. I was 12. Mama. She watched from the couch, knitting, like nothing was happening. Sometimes I wonder if she was more afraid of him than I was. Or maybe she just stopped seeing me as her daughter the day she married him. Our family dinners were like war zones. No one spoke. Knives scraped against plates. Robert cleared his throat like a ticking bomb. If I reached for salt without permission, he'd slam the table. If I left even a pea on the plate, he'd throw the dish in the sink. But what hurt most was Mama's silence. She never spoke up. Not once. It was like she was in her own prison, and I was the inmate she was ashamed of. One night, after a particularly cruel insult, I snapped. I stood up from the dinner table and yelled, "You're not my father. You'll never be." Robert froze. Mama dropped her fork. My heart pounded. I thought he'd hit me. Instead, he laughed. A slow, cold laugh that chilled my spine. Then he stood up and said, "You'll regret that." And I did. Because that same night, I woke up to my suitcase packed. Robert stood at the doorway. Mama was behind him, tears in her eyes. And Robert said, "You're going away. Maybe someone else can fix what's broken in you." I was 13 years old, and I was about to be sent somewhere far, far worse than that house.
If you've ever felt abandoned, unheard, or betrayed by someone who should have protected you, leave a comment. You are not alone. Please like, subscribe, and share this story so it reaches someone who needs to hear it today.
The van didn't even stop outside our house. It just honked. Once. Robert shoved the suitcase into my chest and yanked me by the arm. "Mama!" She didn't even come out the door. She just stood behind the curtain, like a ghost watching a funeral. I remember turning back one last time, hoping she'd run out and scream, "No, don't take my daughter." But she didn't. She never did. The woman in the van wore a gray uniform and didn't smile. "Jennifer Abraham?" she asked, like she already knew the answer. I nodded. She opened the door. Inside that van were two other girls, both staring at the floor. No words were spoken, just the sound of the door clicking shut. I had no idea where they were taking me, but I knew, wherever it was, it wouldn't be home. To this day, I don't know what hurt more, the fear of that van's destination, or the fact that my mother didn't try to stop it. I used to think mothers were like shields. No matter how bad things got, your mom would protect you. But my mother, she was more like the window. She let the storm in. The building was large, brick, and surrounded by a tall fence. The sign out front read, "St. Lucy's Home for Problematic Girls. Founded 1931. The woman let us inside without saying a word. We walked down a hallway that smelled like bleach and boiled cabbage. Girls lined the hall, scrubbing floors or sitting with their heads down. No one smiled. No one looked up. One of the staff, Ms. Clay, stood with a clipboard. She had short hair, thick glasses, and a jaw so sharp it could cut glass. "Name." "Jennifer Abraham," I whispered. She wrote it down, then looked at me like I'd already disappointed her. They took my clothes. Gave me a rough brown uniform that itched like wool. They cut what was left of my hair even shorter. And then they handed me a toothbrush and a rag. "You'll wake at 5 a.m. You'll earn your food. You'll obey, or you'll regret it." That night, I cried into a thin pillow that smelled like soap and sadness. No one comforted me. No one tucked me in. I wasn't a child there. I had a problem, a number on a chart. But the next morning, while sweeping the back hallway, I met Martha. She was tall, with frizzy red hair and freckles. She was 15 and had been at St. Lucy's for 3 years. "First time?" she asked, handing me an extra biscuit from her pocket. I nodded. She smiled. "Stick close to me. Don't talk to the nuns. And for heaven's sake, don't cry where they can see you." I didn't know it then, but Martha would become the closest thing I ever had to a sister. If you stepped out of line, talked back, broke a dish, cried during chores, you got sent to the room. It wasn't a punishment room. It was just a dark, empty storage closet with no windows and one wooden chair. They locked you in there for hours. Sometimes all night. No food. No light. Just your thoughts. One girl wet herself and they made her mop it with her own dress. I ended up in the room on my 4th day. Why? Because I asked for a pencil. One quiet evening, while helping Martha fold sheets, she whispered, "I have something for you." She handed me a tiny piece of paper, folded 8 times over. It was a pencil stub and a scrap of notebook paper. "Write to someone. Anyone. Hide it under your pillow. I'll find a way to get it out." I wrote one name. Mama. I didn't ask her to rescue me. I just asked her if she remembered my birthday, and if she still loved me. Weeks passed. No reply. But Martha. She kept sneaking me little notes, little smiles, little bits of hope. She told me stories about the outside world. About freedom. About books and music and boys and real laughter. One day, out of nowhere, a visitor came to St. Lucy's. A woman with pearl earrings and a clipboard. She asked for me by name. Ms. Clay looked uncomfortable. I was called to the office. Jennifer Abraham, the woman said. I'm from the State Child Welfare Division. We received a concern about your placement. My heart skipped. Was I going home? Was Mama coming? The woman smiled and leaned in. Tell me how they treat you here. Be honest. And I froze. I looked at Ms. Clay, then at the nun in the corner. I opened my mouth and said, I'm okay. Because I was scared. Because I didn't know if telling the truth would make things better. Or worse. That night, when I told Martha what happened, she got quiet. Then she said, I think it's time you knew something about St. Lucy's. Something no one tells the new girls. I asked her what it was. She leaned in close and whispered, Not everyone who comes here gets out. Not everyone who comes here gets out. Those were Martha's words. And the way she whispered them, like we were being watched, sent chills straight through my spine. I sat up on my thin mattress, wide-eyed. What do you mean? I whispered. Martha glanced at the door, then leaned in close. There's a basement below this building. I've seen the door once. They only use it for girls who cause too much trouble, who ask too many questions. Girls like Carrie, Sandra, and Ruth. I blinked. I've never heard of them. Martha nodded. Exactly. They were here. Then one day, they weren't. My hands went cold. I looked around the dorm. 10 beds. 9 girls. But now I started counting who wasn't there. And suddenly, St. Lucy's wasn't just a place of punishment. It was a place of disappearances. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every creak in the walls, made my stomach twist. Was Martha exaggerating? Was I just letting fear get to me? Or had I just not been paying attention? How many girls had I seen one week, then forgotten the next? Had I gotten so used to silence that I didn't even notice people vanishing? Maybe that's what this place did. It didn't just punish you. It erased you. The next morning, everything felt sharper. Ms. Clay was harsher than usual. One girl got slapped for not scrubbing the hall corners tight enough. And then a new rule was posted on the wall. No whispering. No exchanging papers. No unauthorized contact. Martha grabbed my arm later and said, That's because of us. That woman who visited. They're watching now. We have to be careful. I nodded, but inside, I was unraveling. This wasn't a home. It was a cage. And someone had just tightened the lock. One chilly morning, Martha pulled me behind the laundry room. She looked around, then handed me something rolled up tight like a cigarette. It was a map, drawn on the back of a church flyer in pencil. This is the layout of the West Wing and the laundry chute. I've been mapping it for 2 years, she said. There's a window above the boiler room with a broken latch. I think it's our way out. My jaw dropped. You're planning to escape? Martha nodded. Not just for me. For you too. They'll break you, Jennifer. I've seen it happen. If we wait, we'll end up with ghosts in this place. It was the first time anyone had ever offered me freedom. But St. Lucy's was always one step ahead. That evening, right before lights out, a nun burst into our dorm. Where's Martha? She shouted. No one moved. Then they found the map on my mattress. I didn't know she'd hidden it there. They didn't believe me. And Martha, She didn't speak. She just stood up and said, "It's mine." They dragged her out by the arm. She looked at me one last time and mouthed, "Don't cry." That was the last night I ever saw Martha. She was gone the next day. No explanation. Her bed was already cleared. I asked a younger girl if she'd heard anything. She whispered, "The basement." And that word kept echoing in my head, over and over. Basement, basement, basement. They said she ran away. They always say that. But her shoes were still under her bed, and her toothbrush was still on the sink. She didn't run. She was taken. That week I was sent to help the cook, Miss Eleanor. She was older, with silver hair and a limp. She never spoke much, but as I scrubbed potatoes in silence, she looked at me and said, "You were her friend, weren't you?" I looked up. "Who?" She didn't say Martha's name. She didn't have to. She glanced around, then whispered, "You be careful, girl. That place downstairs? I'm not even allowed near it. Don't ask questions. Don't draw attention. Keep your eyes down. That's how you survive." And then, before I could ask more, she walked away. But her warning told me everything I needed to know. This place was hiding something, and I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to find the truth. That night, I crept out of bed and snuck into the hall. I followed the path on Martha's map. My heart beat so hard I thought it might echo off the walls. And there, at the end of the corridor, behind the linen closet, was the door. Rusty, padlocked, and cold. But then I heard something behind it. A voice. A girl's voice. Crying. Whispering. Begging. And it sounded like Martha. I pressed my ear closer to the rusted basement door. The sound was faint, but it was there. A girl's voice. Crying. Whispering. "Martha." I choked out softly. No answer. Then a knock. 3 gentle knocks from the other side. And my heart nearly stopped. I looked over my shoulder. The hallway was dark. Silent. I didn't have a key for the padlock, but I had something better. Desperation. I reached into the seam of my pillowcase where I had hidden a metal fork I'd stolen from the kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. And as I jammed it into the lock, praying it would work, a heavy hand landed on my shoulder. I spun around, and standing behind me in the dark was Sister Marian. It's strange how even when you're afraid, your body remembers everything. That hallway, that locked door, that sound. And it all reminded me of the night my stepfather locked me in the closet at home. I had spilled grape juice on his record player. He dragged me by the arm, shoved me in the dark, and said, "You'll come out when you learn to respect what isn't yours." That was the first time I learned to stay quiet, even when it hurt. But something inside me changed that night. Something that said, I will never be trapped again. Sister Marian yanked me back to the main office. Her nails dug into my skin the entire walk. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. That was worse. She just stared at me and said, "Curiosity is dangerous, Jennifer. It gets girls like you lost." They locked me in the room for 2 nights straight. No food. No water. On the second night, I fainted. When I woke up, there was a bowl of cold porridge by the door and a note. Last warning. A week later, during early morning chores, I was sent to wipe down the chapel floors. It was empty, except for Miss Eleanor, the cook. She quietly walked past me, dropped a folded note by the altar, and kept going. I grabbed it when no one was looking. Inside was one sentence. "She's still alive." I looked around. My hands trembled. Miss Eleanor had risked everything to get me that message. That meant Martha wasn't gone. And if she was alive, I had to try again. The second time I tried to reach the basement, they were ready. Someone had snitched. I was dragged back, beaten with a ruler across my knuckles until they bled. I was banned from the library, banned from the kitchen, reassigned to latrine duty. I scrubbed toilets with salt and vinegar until my skin peeled raw. But they couldn't scrub the truth out of me. Because now I know. One night while mopping near the office, I noticed Miss Clay had left the filing cabinet open. Inside were files of every girl. I pulled out Martha's. Inside it read, non-compliant, subject relocated to sublevel, monitored status, retention approved, sublevel. It wasn't just a basement. It was a hidden wing, a prison within a prison. They weren't just punishing us. They were hiding us. A week later, I was summoned to the front office. When I walked in, I froze. Standing there, clutching her purse, trembling in a beige sweater, was my mother. She looked older, thinner, eyes full of guilt. She didn't hug me. She just said, I'm here to check on you. Ms. Clay smiled. Oh, Jennifer's doing just fine. She's been a challenge, but we're helping her learn. My mother looked at me, but I didn't say a word, because I knew if I opened my mouth, I would scream. Then she whispered something. I didn't know they were like this. Too little, too late. That night, I sat up in bed and made a plan. A real one. Not like before. If I couldn't save myself, I'd at least save Martha. I waited until the lights went out, snuck into the hallway, followed the map, past the laundry chute, through the boiler room, and then I saw it, a metal hatch, half covered by crates. I pushed them aside, crawled in, and began to descend the narrow steps into darkness. And what I saw at the bottom. The metal stairs creaked under my feet. Each step down felt colder, darker, heavier. I had a candle stub wrapped in cloth, stolen from the chapel. One spark. That's all I had. As I reached the bottom, the air turned damp. It smelled like mildew and medicine. And then, there it was. A hallway. Concrete walls. 6 doors on each side. No windows. No light. I took one step forward, then I heard a shuffle. A faint sound. A whisper. A girl. Hello. I called out. No answer. Then, from behind the 5th door on the left, someone started knocking. Slow. Deliberate. It was Martha. If someone told me a year earlier that I'd be crawling through secret tunnels beneath a Catholic home for girls, I would have laughed. But then again, a year earlier, I still believed my mother loved me, that someone would eventually save me, that the world was fair. Now I know better. No one was coming. Not for me. Not for Martha. We'd have to save ourselves. I reached for the door handle. It was locked, but not tightly. The screws were rusted. I wedged the fork, my trusty bent little fork, between the frame and latch. It snapped. But the door creaked open anyway. Inside, it was cold. No bed. Just a mattress on the floor, stained and thin. And lying on it, Martha. Her face was thinner. Her hair had been chopped. But her eyes lit up the second she saw me. Jennifer, she whispered. You came. I ran to her, held her. She was real. She was alive. I thought so too, she said, chuckling weakly. I looked around. There were trays on the floor, half-eaten food, water stains on the walls. How long have you been here? I asked. She shook her head. Time doesn't mean much down here. She tried to sit up and winced. I touched her arm. Bruises. What did they do to you? They said they were fixing me, rewiring the bad thoughts, making me obedient. I felt bile in my throat. This is a prison. No, she said. This is a grave with a door. Suddenly, we heard movement behind the next door. Whispers. A soft cough. I stood up. There's more. Martha nodded. There were 7 of us. They took 2 away last month. Only 4 now, maybe 3. I couldn't believe it. St. Lucy's wasn't a reform home. It was a containment facility for girls who were too smart, too loud, too alive. We have to leave, I said. Tonight. Martha shook her head. They'll catch us. Then we don't give them the chance. I helped her to her feet. She could barely walk, but she nodded. I opened the door wider. 2 more girls looked out from cracked doors down the hall. Come with us, I whispered. We're leaving. We didn't have time for fear. Just courage. Desperate, stupid courage. We made it halfway back through the service tunnel when the lights flicked on. All of them. Sirens. Footsteps. Voices yelling. They're out. The girls escaped. We ran. Martha stumbled. I grabbed her arm, pulling with everything I had. But just before we reached the laundry chute, a hand yanked me back. Ms. Clay. Furious. Red-faced. You stupid little girl, she screamed. And then, a scream from behind. One of the girls was dragged away. Another hit with a baton. I fought. I scratched. I bit Ms. Clay's hand. She slapped me so hard I saw stars. Through the chaos, I saw her, standing at the top of the stairwell, holding a visitor's badge. My mother. Her eyes wide, mouth open. She was watching. Again. But this time, she didn't stay silent. She screamed. What are you doing to my daughter? Everything froze. Even Ms. Clay. A nun tried to explain. My mother pulled out a folded letter. The one I had written months ago. The one Martha smuggled out. She waved it in the air, yelling, I'm taking her home, and I'm shutting this place down. But what she didn't know was, they wouldn't let us leave that easily. And someone else had already called the police. Let's be the voice for those who were silenced. For a moment, everything stood still. The nuns froze. Ms. Clay's grip on my arm loosened. My mother stood on the stairs like an avenging angel. Then, doors slammed. Girls screamed. And stormed the police. 2 officers, one tall and stern, the other younger, rushed in with flashlights and radios crackling. My mother waved the letter in the air, shouting, This place has been torturing my daughter, and God knows how many others. The young officer looked at me, my bloody lip, swollen cheek, torn uniform, then back at Ms. Clay. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. But that's when the real nightmare began, because the lies had already been prepared. They didn't even hesitate. Ms. Clay switched her expression from fury to sorrow in a blink. She gestured to me and said, This girl has a long record of violent outbursts. We've been documenting her behavior for months. Her friend Martha encouraged her to run away. We were in the middle of a behavioral correction session when she attacked a staff member. My mouth dropped. Behavioral correction? That's what they called locking children in basements. But the worst part was the look on the officers' faces. They hesitated. One of the officers pulled my mother aside. I saw him whisper something. Her face changed. She looked back at me. Not with rage. Not with love. With doubt. It hit me harder than Ms. Clay's slap. She was going to let them tell her I was broken, that I needed this place. Tears burned behind my eyes. I was about to scream, but then a voice cut through. Maybe I'm broken too, then. It was Martha. She stumbled into the light, bruised and barefoot, supported by one of the other rescued girls. If Jennifer's violent, it's because she was protecting us, she yelled. They locked us down there. No food for days. They made Ruth clean floors with her own hair. They beat us. Ask Eleanor. Ask anyone. Her voice cracked, but her fire didn't. And for once, they listened. That's when Miss Eleanor came forward. I don't know how she found the courage. Maybe it was Martha. Maybe it was knowing this place had buried enough secrets. She handed the younger officer a file folder. Photos, names, handwritten notes, girls who had disappeared. Medical logs showing injuries, unexplained transfers, even photos of the basement rooms. Taken in secret. The older officer's face hardened. He turned to Ms. Clay. You're under arrest. She didn't fight, didn't scream. She just smiled and said, You'll never understand what we tried to fix. Hours later, after statements and flashing lights and warm blankets, I sat in the back seat of my mother's car. We didn't speak. Not at first. She kept her eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. Then she said, I thought I was protecting you by sending you somewhere strict. I didn't know they'd hurt you. I didn't say anything, because the truth was, she did know. Not all of it, but enough. And she chose silence. 3 days later, social services found Martha a foster family. A good one. I got to visit her. We sat on her new porch, sipping lemonade. I don't know what will happen now, she said. I smiled. We're not there anymore. That's what happens now. We held hands for a moment. 2 girls who survived the storm. A month later, my mother showed me the newspaper. St. Lucy's Home for Girls permanently closed, investigation ongoing. But under that headline, another one. New facility opens in neighboring county, New Leaf Academy, to focus on reforming troubled youth. My chest went cold. Because the head administrator, a woman named Sister Marian, they were just starting over. I wasn't going to let it happen again. So I made a choice, a promise to myself. I would speak, loud, clear, without fear, because I knew the truth now. Silence wasn't safe. It was surrender, and it was time for someone to fight back. I was 13 years old when I stood outside that courtroom holding a file of secrets. They wanted me to stay quiet, forget, move on. But how could I move on when girls like Ruth and Carrie never got out? When the same woman who locked us underground just changed uniforms and moved to the next town? So I made a vow. I'd expose them all, even if I had to do it alone. The bruises faded. My bones stopped aching. But the shame, the nightmares, they stayed. I'd wake up gasping, still smelling bleach and basement dust. Still hearing the door slam shut behind me. And sometimes, I'd still hear my mother saying nothing at all. But I also remembered something else. Martha's whisper. We don't survive this to stay silent. When I returned to school, the whispers followed me. They say she tried to burn a church. She was in an institution. Her mom had to beg to get her out. They didn't know the truth. No one cared to ask. Suddenly, everyone wanted to hear my story. But I didn't do it for attention. I did it so no girl ever got dragged down those stairs again. And just when I thought it was over, just when I thought I had told everything, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. There are more girls, in another facility. And a name. Clearwell Institute, Ohio. They hadn't stopped. They just moved again. The envelope was plain. No return address. No stamp. Just slipped under our door in the middle of the night. Inside, a single sentence. There are more girls, in another facility. And a name, scribbled beneath it. Clearwell Institute, Southern Ohio. My hands trembled. I stared at it for a long time, thinking, could it be real? Could someone be risking everything to warn me? Or was it a trap? But I knew one thing for sure. If there was even one more Martha out there, I couldn't stay silent. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I had become a witness. And witnesses have responsibilities. People were starting to believe me. Not just in my town, but across the country. But Clearwell wasn't in the headlines. Not yet. It was hidden, like St. Lucy's, buried in cornfields and contracts and Christian discipline. I needed proof, and that meant going there myself. I sat at the kitchen table, letter in hand. My mother was folding laundry. I'm going, I said. She didn't look up. You're only 14. I survived worse before I turned 13. She sighed. You're going to get hurt again. No, I said. I'm going to stop people from getting hurt. Silence. Then, slowly, she pulled a folded $20 bill from her purse. For the bus, she whispered. That was her version of an apology. I took it. Before I left, I called Dana Wells, the reporter who broke the St. Lucy's story. I need your help again, I said. She didn't hesitate. She booked 2 bus tickets. One for me, one for her. If there's a story there, she said, we'll burn it to the ground. Clearwell Institute sat at the end of a dirt road outside a town called Barlow. It looked like an old farmhouse, but the fence said otherwise. Tall steel, barbed wire, guard booth, a sign out front. Clearwell, where discipline shapes character. Dana grabbed her camera. I grabbed my courage. We asked for a tour, posing as potential volunteers. A man in a black shirt with gold buttons said, "Private facility. No outsiders. Contact the board." We left. But not really. We parked across the road. Waited. Watched. That night, we saw it. A van pulled in. 3 girls. Blindfolded. Dana took pictures. I took notes. On the 3rd day, a girl from town approached us in the diner. She worked in the laundry room. I read your article, she said to Dana. Some of the girls here, they don't come out. Ever. She handed us a photo. A bruised girl behind a barred window. I can't do more. But maybe that helps. It did. More than she knew. We returned to the fence that night to leave a note for one of the girls. As we crouched by the tree line, Dana froze. That woman, she whispered. I looked up. Sister Marian, walking the grounds in a new uniform. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was thriving. My breath caught in my throat. I thought she was banned, I said. Dana clenched her jaw. She registered under a new identity. They're playing a new game. But this time, we had a new plan. That same night, Dana's car windows were smashed. My notebook was stolen. A note was left behind. Walk away, girl. Or disappear like the rest. I wanted to run. I really did. But then I remembered the girls in the photo. The ones blindfolded. And the sound of Martha's voice saying, Don't cry where they can see you. So I didn't cry. I got louder. Dana called her editor. They rushed the story. It aired that week. Footage, photos, leaked records. The names of every girl who'd entered Clearwell but never returned home. The next morning, protests began. Then came news vans. Then came investigators. And once again, Sister Marian ran. But she didn't just run. She vanished. Gone without a trace. No bank activity. No records. No trail. But that night, I got another letter. Same handwriting. No return address. Inside, she's still out there. With help. In Texas this time. And underneath it, just 2 words. Don't stop. And I won't. Because as long as there are girls like me, there will be someone who thinks they can silence us. The handwriting was the same. No name. No signature. No address. Just a sentence that stopped my breath cold. She's still out there. In Texas this time. And beneath it. Don't stop. I stared at the page for what felt like hours. I am 15 now. And every year of those 15 had led me to this moment. St. Lucy's. The sublevel. Clearwell. The bruises. The betrayals. The silence. No more. The handwriting was the same. No name. No signature. No address. Just a sentence that stopped my breath cold. She's still out there. In Texas this time. And beneath it. Don't stop. I stared at the page for what felt like hours. I am 15 now. And every year of those 15 had led me to this moment. St. Lucy's. The sublevel. Clearwell. The bruises. The betrayals. The silence. No more. This time, I wasn't just chasing justice. I was bringing it with me. I had spent years carrying the weight of other people's shame. Years telling myself I'd never be strong enough. Old voices still echoed in my mind. She's dramatic. She's making it up. She just wants attention. But I knew now. They only say that to girls who refuse to stay quiet. So I packed my notes, my files, and boarded a Greyhound bus heading south. It didn't look like a prison. It looked like a spa. Clean walls, fresh paint, smiling staff, Bible quotes on the windows. But I'd learned long ago, the prettier the place, the darker the secrets. Dana met me there. She had aged since St. Lucy's. Tired eyes, but sharper than ever. We posed as mother and daughter, touring as potential donors. The woman who greeted us? A tall, well-dressed blonde. A name tag that read, Sister Marie. But I knew her face. I knew that cruel curve of her lip. It was Sister Marian. She looked at me, smiled. I held out my hand. She shook it. You look familiar, she said slowly. You too, I replied. Have we met? No, I lied. But I've heard stories. That was the game now. We both knew. We were just waiting for someone to make a move. That night, we stayed at a motel 5 minutes from the center. While reviewing hidden camera footage Dana had taken, something stood out. A staff member, young, with a nervous twitch, passed us 3 times. Always watching. Never speaking. The next day, he slipped us a note. Check room 6A. 2nd floor. 10 p.m. Don't be seen. And at 10 p.m., we crept to the rear fence, slipped through the bushes, and found the window unlocked. Room 6A. Inside, 3 girls, all under 14, all terrified. One said, they make us do prayer isolation if we talk too loud. Another whispered, We can't call home. They say our parents don't want us anymore. And taped to the underside of the bed was a list of names. Dozens of them, marked with stars, dates. Some were marked transferred. Others, ER. And some, just X. My hand shook. I was looking at a roster of lost girls. We got out and raced to the motel. Dana called her contact at a national broadcast station. She handed me the phone. "Tell them," she said. "All of it." So I did. On live TV. With shaking breath and fire in my voice. "I'm Jennifer Abraham. I survived St. Lucy's. I exposed Clearwell. And now I'm telling you, Sister Marian is still hurting girls. This time, she's calling it safe haven. But the pain is the same." That broadcast reached millions. And the very next morning, FBI agents raided the center. Sister Marian tried to flee through the back gate. She was stopped. Dana and I stood on the sidewalk as they handcuffed her. I looked her in the eye. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply said, "They always believe the loud ones. But not for long." And I replied, "They believe in the brave. That's the difference." That was the last time I ever saw her. And this time, she didn't come back. Over the next year, the investigation expanded. Other homes across the country were exposed. More girls stepped forward. Martha wrote to me from college. She was studying social work. Wanted to open a center for real healing. And me. I finished school. Then nursing school. Then trauma counseling. Because I knew there would always be another girl. Another silence waiting to be broken. One spring evening, my mother came to visit me. We sat on the porch. The air smelled like lilacs. She said, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you know. I'm proud of you." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I don't need you to be proud. I just needed you to believe me. Back then." She nodded slowly. And for the first time in years, she didn't stay silent. "I'm sorry, Jennifer." And that was enough. My name is Jennifer Abraham. I'm no longer afraid of closets, or basements, or uniforms, or the word obedience. I was broken, then I rebuilt it. And now, I help others do the same. Because every time we speak up, every time we refuse to disappear, we tear down the walls they built to trap us, one voice at a time.